Connie Francis was the golden voice of innocent America.
Where the boys are, where the boys.
A petite powerhouse who ruled the airwaves when music was simple, sweet, and safe.
And I want to read positive, upbeat things because my life has really been a Cinderella life with the exception of the last 10 years.
But beneath Francis's sugar-coated exterior and million-selling smile burned a fierce resistance to the musical revolution that was about to destroy everything she represented.
Land here, nothing.
Because at the time, I mean, Fort Lauderdale was really not well known.
It was a prairie. Are you kidding? Pasternak.
Welcome to another episode of Offstage Tales, where today we're revealing the cultural battles of Connie Francis and the 6 acts that she watched tear down the musical world she had helped build. The Italian-American sensation behind timeless hits like Where the Boys Are and Stupid Cupid wasn't just witnessing a changing industry, she was fighting a losing war against it. Music used to bring families together, Francis once lamented to a reporter in 1965. Now it's dividing generations and destroying everything beautiful about popular song. As the 1960s cultural earthquake shook the foundations of American entertainment, Francis found herself standing against forces that would reshape music forever. From soul music invasions to British band conquests, Francis's opposition to these artists wasn't just professional jealousy. It was a desperate attempt to preserve the values and sounds of a disappearing America. These weren't simple career rivalries, but epic clashes between old and new worlds. So step back in time and witness the final stand of America's pop princess against the musical forces that would define a generation. 6. The Supremes. Starting our countdown at number 6 is a clash that marked the beginning of the end for traditional pop, the Supremes. Francis's resistance to Diana Ross and her group wasn't about their talent. It was about watching Motown's polished soul sound systematically replace the sweet pop formulas that had made her a star.
And thrill that all of those kinds of things that you've experienced in your life.
The concern reportedly began in 1964 when the Supremes started climbing the same charts that Francis had dominated for years. According to former MGM Records executive Mike Curb, Francis watched their rise with growing alarm, telling her producers, "They're not just competing with me, they're changing what popular music means. This isn't the same audience anymore." What worried Francis wasn't their vocal abilities, but their cultural impact. While Francis had built her career on wholesome love songs that parents approved of, the Supremes were achieving crossover success with what Francis reportedly called rhythm and blues dressed up for white radio, and music that's pulling kids away from family-friendly entertainment. Popular songs should unite generations, not create divides, Francis told Variety in 1965, in what many interpreted as her concerns about Motown's influence on American youth. The anxiety deepened when radio stations began favoring the Supremes' sophisticated productions over Francis's traditional arrangements. At a 1966 industry showcase, witnesses claim Francis left during the Supremes' performance, later telling her manager, "I can see the writing on the wall. This is what they want now instead of real pop music." 5. The Beach Boys. At number 5, we encounter Francis's battle against the California invasion, the Beach Boys.
None of the guys go steady 'cause it wouldn't be right to leave the best girl home now and sad.
Her opposition to Brian Wilson's surf sound wasn't about their harmonies. It was about watching West Coast culture replace the sophisticated East Coast values that had shaped her entire musical identity.
Now the world of music belongs to the kids. And the kids made the stars. And they didn't buy albums, they bought the 45s.
The alarm reportedly started in 1963 when Surfin' USA began dominating radio stations that had previously featured Francis's more mature material. According to former Capitol Records executive Alan Livingston, Francis expressed her frustration directly, saying, "They're turning music into a beach party. Where's the sophistication? Where's the emotional depth that real songs require?" What disturbed Francis wasn't their musical skill, but their subject matter. While Francis had established herself with complex emotional ballads about love and heartbreak, The Beach Boys were achieving massive popularity with what Francis reportedly called teenage playground songs and simple, fun music that ignores life's real experiences. Music should reflect the full spectrum of human emotion, not just summer vacation fantasies, Francis told Billboard in 1964, expressing her belief that popular songs needed substance beyond youthful escapism. The cultural shift became undeniable when the Beach Boys' carefree California lifestyle started influencing fashion and attitudes nationwide. Wilson seemed oblivious to Francis's disapproval, later praising her vocal technique in interviews. But for Francis, the Beach Boys symbolized the juvenile direction that was draining sophistication from popular music and replacing meaningful content with endless summer themes. 4. Petula Clark. At number 4, we discover Francis's most patriotic battle, Petula Clark.
When the evening comes, there's so much to do. You better put on your best and wear a smile.
Her resentment toward the British songbird wasn't about vocal competition. It was about watching a foreign artist succeed in American markets using the exact same wholesome formula that Francis had perfected years earlier. The frustration reportedly peaked in 1965 when Clark's Downtown conquered American radio, while Francis's latest releases struggled for airplay. According to former Warner Brothers executive Joe Smith, Francis watched Clark's television appearances with growing bitterness, telling her team, "She's doing my act with a British accent and getting praised like it's revolutionary. American audiences are betraying their own artists for imported copies." What infuriated Francis wasn't Clark's abilities, but the novelty factor. While Francis had spent decades building her reputation through consistent hits and professional dedication, Clark was receiving enthusiastic reception for what Francis reportedly called recycled American pop with foreign packaging and my musical style stolen by someone with a cute accent.
That magazine, it was a Cinderella life. But it wasn't real.
But for the last decade,
Audiences should support the artists who built this industry, not abandon them for overseas imitations, Francis told Cashbox magazine in 1966, expressing her belief that American loyalty was being betrayed. The situation worsened when Clark began appearing on the same television variety shows that had previously featured Francis as their primary female vocalist. At a 1967 network party, witnesses claim Francis avoided Clark entirely, later telling producers, "I won't validate someone who's profiting from my innovations." Clark seemed genuinely puzzled by Francis's coldness, later calling her an inspiration in interviews. But for Francis, Clark represented cultural invasion, foreigners claiming success with American-created formulas while domestic pioneers were forgotten. 3. The Renettes. Number 3 brings us to Francis's most personal threat, the Renettes. Her opposition to Phil Spector's girl group wasn't about their beehive hairdos. It was about watching collective female power systematically eliminate the solo female star system that had made her career possible. The terror reportedly began in 1963 when Be My Baby demonstrated that groups of women could achieve the same impact as individual performers. According to former Phillies Records insider Jack Nitsha, Francis studied the Renettes' success obsessively, telling industry contacts, "They're proving that one voice doesn't matter anymore. Why book Connie Francis when you can get 3 girls for the same price?" What threatened Francis wasn't their vocal blend, but their business model. While Francis had built her empire on being the singular focus of audience attention, the Renettes were achieving chart dominance through what Francis reportedly called diluted star power and shared spotlight arrangements that reduce individual artistic importance. Solo artists create personal connections with audiences that groups can never match, Francis told Record World in 1964, defending her belief that individual performers offered deeper emotional experiences. The threat became existential when promoters began preferring girl groups for major venues and television shows. At a 1965 industry convention, witnesses claim Francis confronted booking agents directly, asking, "Are you replacing all female soloists with manufactured groups because it's cheaper and easier to control?" Ronnie Spector seemed unaware of Frances's concerns, later expressing admiration for her longevity in interviews. But for Francis, the Renettes represented the death of individual female artistry, proving that the music industry was willing to sacrifice personal connection for economic efficiency. 2. Bob Dylan. At number 2, we uncover Francis's most ideological war, Bob Dylan.
I'ma take this bag off of me.
Her hostility toward the folk prophet wasn't about his harmonica playing. It was about watching him transform popular music from joyful escapism into serious social commentary.
Aber die Liebe ist ein seltsames Spiel auf der
Ja, das ist es. Und das war der deutsche Titel?
Ja.
That Francis believed was destroying music's healing power. The opposition reportedly crystallized in 1963 when Dylan's protest songs began influencing other artists to abandon entertainment for activism. According to former Columbia Records executive John Hammond, Francis voiced her concerns repeatedly, saying, "Music used to lift people's spirits and help them forget their troubles. Now it's becoming a lecture hall where everyone's angry about something." What alarmed Francis wasn't Dylan's songwriting skill, but his message. While Francis had dedicated her career to providing emotional comfort and romantic fantasy through her recordings, Dylan was achieving critical praise for what Francis reportedly called depressing social sermons and political propaganda disguised as entertainment that makes audiences feel guilty instead of happy. "People work hard all week and deserve music that brings joy, not more problems to worry about," Francis told Music Business in 1965, defending her philosophy that popular songs should provide relief from life's difficulties. The cultural shift became undeniable when other artists began copying Dylan's serious approach to songwriting. At a 1966 songwriters gathering, witnesses claim Francis argued passionately against the protest movement, telling colleagues, "We're killing the magic of music by turning every song into a political statement." Dylan seemed indifferent to Francis's criticism, rarely commenting on traditional pop artists. But for Francis, Dylan represented the death of musical innocence, transforming the recording industry from a source of comfort into a platform for uncomfortable truths. 1. The Beatles. And finally, at number 1, we reach the most catastrophic revelation of all, the Beatles. Yes, the Fab Four reportedly earned Connie Francis's ultimate despair and what became the most devastating cultural defeat of her entire career.
It's a love that has no past.
The devastation reportedly began in February 1964, when Beatlemania exploded across America during their Ed Sullivan Show appearance. According to former booking agent Frank Barcelona, Francis watched the broadcast from her hotel room and immediately called him in tears, saying, "It's over. Everything we built, everything American popular music stood for, they just destroyed it in 3 songs." The finality became clear when radio stations nationwide began abandoning traditional pop for rock and roll formats. At a 1965 recording session, witnesses claim Francis broke down completely, telling her producer, "They didn't just take my audience, they changed what music means in America forever." Music journalist Al Aronowitz reported that Francis later told him, "The Beatles didn't just end my career, they ended an entire way of life. American families used to share the same music, and now parents can't even understand what their children are listening to." The Beatles remained diplomatically silent about older American artists. But for Francis, they represented total cultural apocalypse. Foreign invaders who had permanently destroyed the innocent world where her music had once provided the soundtrack to American happiness. So there you have it. Even America's sweetheart couldn't stop the musical revolution. Was Connie defending tradition or fighting progress? Which battle moved you most? Subscribe and share your memories below.